In accordance with the customs of this university, I open the ceremony with a prayer. Spiritus Sancti, gratia illuminet sensus corda nostra, which means we pray that the Holy Spirit enlightens our mind and heart. Please be seated. Welcome to all of you. Selamat datang. And j'ai compris que, bien que les parents soient indonésiens, ils sont lyonnais d'adoption, donc je peux vous saluer dans la langue de Voltaire et j'espère que vous pourrez suivre dans la langue de Shakespeare la défense de la thèse de votre fils. You've already seen that I'm quite a lousy rector. I'm not the real rector, I'm the pro-rector for today, and I can't count. I thought there were too many, and we're just perfect amount. So next to me are three gentlemen, Professor van Ginneke, Prokop, and Jacobs, who are the supervisors. We may assume that in the past years they've had ample opportunity to discuss the matter with the candidates, so they'll hush and be silent. Then we go to two gentlemen and a woman. Professor Verhagen is professor of lung surgery here. Professor Welling, though dressed up as a professor from Nijmegen, is in fact from our capital, Amsterdam. He's professor in machine learning at the informatics department. Welcome. And next to him, Professor Pluim, who is from Eindhoven, and she is in biomedical engineering. The three of them formed the manuscript commission that looked into the work of the candidate and assessed it as more than sufficient to be defended in public today. Then we have four people that are waiting to dress up in gowns. Dr. van der Heijden from the pulmonary surgery, or no, medicine. Then Dr. Zinger from Eindhoven too, from the electrical energy. Then Professor Ciompi, senior researcher computational, pathology, and Mrs. Peters-Bucks from here, and she is in radiology. But before we go to the harsh part of the ceremony, the protocol, where he'll be tested to the limits, we give the floor to the candidate to explain what he's been doing all that time.
With the permission of the Council of Deans and in order to obtain the degree of doctor from Radboud University Nijmegen, I would like to defend in public my doctoral thesis entitled Computer-Aided Diagnosis in Thoracic CT Scans for Lung Cancer Screening. Lung cancer is the second most common cancer and the leading cause of cancer death worldwide. The figure on the right shows the estimated death of cancers from American Society in 2018. It shows that lung cancer kills more than colorectal, pancreas, and breast cancer combined. The high mortality is because the symptoms typically occur when the cancer is already at the late stage, and therefore when the patients came to the doctors, treatment options are already limited. Therefore, to reduce the high mortality rate, early detection of subjects with lung cancer is essential. One question is to define which subjects are actually having the cancers. In order to find these subjects, computed tomography can be used. Computed tomography, or CT, creates volumetric scans of area inside the body, and using the CT, radiologists could view the internal structures of the lung and identify the early stage cancer. The figure shows the example of CT scans from axial, coronal, and sagittal view. In order to evaluate whether CT actually reduced mortality, several screening trials were performed, and in 2011, a large randomized control screening trial in the United States called NLST showed that screening using low-dose CT reduced lung cancer mortality by about 20% in comparison of screening using X-rays. This illustrates the screening process. High-risk subjects, typically smokers, are invited to perform a screening test, and when the screening test is positive, they have to be invited for the further examinations to determine the potential treatments. There are two main tasks in the lung cancer screening. The first task is lung nodule detection. Nodules are possible early manifestation of lung cancers, and therefore they have to be identified to identify the lung cancers. It's defined as rounded opacity measuring up to 3 cm in diameter. As illustration, the figure shows an example of axial slice of CT scans, and from here we can see a lot of structures, for example, airway, vessels, and bones. And the blue box indicates a small nodules. The task for radiologists is to identify all possible nodules in the CT scan with a very high accuracy. The second task would be to perform lung nodule malignancy predictions. Not all lung nodules will be the cancer, so malignancy prediction will help to determine which one is actually going to be cancerous and need further examinations. So the malignancy prediction typically based on the nodule size, growth, and morphology, and is important to determine the follow-up strategy. The figures show examples of axial patches with nodules in the center, and those that are indicated by red box are actually the lung cancers, and the rest are benign. The lung cancers confirmed by histopathological examination, and the task for radiologists is to identify which nodules will be actually malignant or suspicious to be malignant and which one are benign. The implementation of screening would increase the workload of radiologists, although they found to be also beneficial to reduce mortality. The reason is because reading the CT scans is a very tedious task, especially when you have to identify all possible nodules, error-prone, and also time-consuming. Computer-aided diagnosis, or CAD, would potentially improve the efficiency of screening by automating several repetitive tasks. In this thesis, we propose machine learning algorithms for nodule detection and nodule malignancy prediction. In Chapter 2, we propose an automatic detection of large nodules. Large nodules are highly suspicious to be malignant among the other type of nodules. However, they are often missed by the CAD system. The reason is because CAD has been mainly used as a second reader to reduce missed nodules, and therefore researchers are developing the CAD system and optimizing to find very difficult to see small nodules, typically ranging from 3 to 10 millimeters. To further reduce the reading efforts, we need to be able to detect all types of nodules, especially those that are very suspicious. Therefore, detecting large nodules with high sensitivity is essential. We show that a dedicated large nodule CAD system can identify the vast majority of highly suspicious lesions with a small number of false positives. In Chapter 3, we propose an automatic detection of nodules using convolution networks. One of the main issues in the CAD development is the wide morphological variation of lung lesions. The figures show examples of nodules in axial, sagittal, and coronal with different types of shapes and size. There are also non-nodules that look very similar to nodules, and this makes it very difficult to differentiate them. Typical CAD system consists of candidate detection and false positive reduction, and in the false positive reduction, feature extractions need to be defined. However, manually designing the optimal set of feature extraction algorithm is far from trivial and is difficult. Convolution network is another machine learning algorithms that could be trained end-to-end from the data. And we propose to replace feature extraction and classification with the ConvNets for false positive reduction. The figure shows FRC curves of different systems. FRC curve shows a trade-off between sensitivity and average number of false positives per scan for a system. Higher sensitivity and lower number of false positives is better. The blue curve shows a conventional CAD system which uses false positive reduction and classifier. When we replace the false positive reduction with ConvNet, then we can improve the performance further, which shown in the red lines and then also black lines. We conclude that ConvNet have a promising performance for false positive reduction of CAD systems. In Chapter 4, we perform validation and comparison of nodule detection algorithms. The performance of published CAD systems, although there are many, that can vary substantially because different data sets from different hospitals could be used and evaluation criteria could be very different. A comparative performance evaluation of CAD system on a common database is proposed, Luna 16, to make it easier to compare CAD systems and to make it also easier to measure the progress that we made as a society for the development. In Luna 16, we share the data in luna16redchallenge.org, and web-based evaluation framework is created. Thereafter, we invited researchers to develop, download, and evaluate their algorithm in our dataset, and the result of their performance is listed in the Luna 16 leaderboard, as shown in the figure on the right. We observed that Luna 16 attracted more research groups, even those that have not been working on medical image analysis, to contribute, and novel approaches have been proposed. We observed that all leading solutions employ ConvNet, and we combine all systems submitted to the Luna 16, then we could achieve excellent sensitivity of 95% at lower than 1 false positive per scan. In Chapter 5, we observe the possibility of combining automatic detection of nodules and malignancy prediction. As the majority of nodules are benign, we have to be able to detect malignant nodules with high sensitivity. PanCan or Brock model has been proposed, which is a clinical nodule malignancy model. To use the PanCan model, we have to insert several characteristics such as nodule characteristics, nodule size, nodule count, and nodule type, as well as patient characteristics such as age, gender, and family history of lung cancers. With this information, then we can compute the probability of nodule being malignant. In this example, it is 1.9. We show that combining CAD systems and nodule malignancy model could improve detection sensitivity for malignant nodules. Another possibility is to predict nodule malignancy directly from an image, just like a doctor. In this chapter, we propose a COVNET model to predict the malignancy from the image, and we compare the performance against the PanCan model and 11 radiologies. The curves shows AUC curves of the 11 radiologies, PanCan, and COVNET, and we observe that the COVNET algorithm can achieve comparable performance to radiologies. To conclude, we have proposed a dedicated large nodule CAD system that can detect highly suspicious nodules. We propose convolution networks to be suitable to be used for false positive reduction of CAD systems. We perform validation and comparison of different nodule detection algorithms using Luna 16 challenge. We show that combining CAD system and a malignancy prediction model improve detection sensitivity for malignant nodules. And we observed that nodule malignancy prediction using COVNET could achieve comparable performance to radiologists. Having presented the summary of my doctoral thesis, I return the floor to the director.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Candidate. In the beginning, I was wondering why you were speaking at such a speed, but now I understand it's such a work you've done that it hardly was doable in 10 minutes. So now we going to start the opposition, and the chair of the doctoral examination board, Professor Verhagen, will put the first questions.
Thank you, Mr. Candidate. My congratulations. I think it's an impressive thesis, and it was a very interesting reading, although it's hard stuff, but it's very interesting, especially since it will influence and so for importance for clinical use finally. Hopefully it will speed up the implementation of lung cancer screening in clinical practice. I want to congratulate you, of course, but also your parents, relatives. I think being born in France, raised in Jakarta, or at least studied over there, and then finally defending a thesis over here, that's a huge achievement. Of course, I also want to congratulate your promoters and co-promoter. They will and can be proud too, I think. Having said this, I have indeed a few questions, and they will come from a clinical point of view, of course. And first of all, you demonstrate in chapter 6 that the system, or the combined system, is finally outperforming human expert readers. However, as far as I know, until now, such a system is not in clinical practice yet. And my question is, what actually hampers implementation of such a system just now?
Yeah, Arnaud, sir, thank you very much for the questions. The clinical implementations and the research, in my opinion, is a different field. So we have shown some nice works. However, in my opinion, for the clinical implementation, we need to perform further evaluations. For example, in the clinic for the lung cancer screening, then what we have to see is to understand whether the algorithms will work in different type of data and those kind of stuff. And the performance should also be evaluated in larger scale. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's not in the clinic yet. Another reason would also be about the what is it? The regulation from because in order to have the algorithms implemented in the clinic, there have to be a lot of regulations. For example, need to be proven by the FDA. So there are lots of works to do, and yeah.
Legal regulations, you
Correct.
mean? Yeah. So in fact, it's too early yet, you say. That's your answer. On the other hand, I think as a radiologist, I would feel humble having read your thesis and seeing what's possible. Your system is meant to help the radiologist or human reader. And yeah, following the first question, my next question would be, what do you think is the position of the radiologist after implementing such a system in clinical use? Would he feel free to deny the answer given by the system, or what's his position? Actually, I'm going to debate about what do you think is the gold standard having such a system available?
Understood. So the position of the radiologist, I think that will move progressively. So I think in the beginning it should be used, for example, like as concurrent readers, where radiologists will open the scan, and then we have the computer predictions available in the screen. So for example, the nodule malignancy, the location of the nodules, and until the end that the reports could be automatically generated. When we already have that, then the radiologist will basically check the results, and then you will they will say whether the results are actually correct. And I think that's also important, because when the CAD system actually makes mistake, then it could also give some information that could help the developers to improve the algorithm. So I think in the first implementation, that radiologists should basically look at the results of the CAD systems and then correct when it is necessary. So that will also already reduce the time, because you don't have to, for example, look at the scan manually to find the nodules. And then when the computer algorithms is getting better, then we could probably move towards screening reader protocol, for which the computer basically will decide which one have to go to further examination from the doctor, and they will be referred to the doctor.
Is this a satisfactory answer?
Yeah, thank you. I think my time is over.
It seems to be, yes. Well, the fascinating question, if people are going to be replaced by computers, has brought us to invite someone from Amsterdam. We're very honored, Professor Welling, that you made the effort to come here, and we'll be looking forward to your questions.
Mr. Candidate, it was a great pleasure to read your thesis and to see machine learning, and in particular deep convolutional neural networks, applied to this exciting field. In fact, Bram and I are both very excited, and Josine too, about applying sort of deep learning in this field. And tomorrow we have a start of a conference. I hope you will be there as a newly doctor to attend our conference. So I wanted to ask you first about chapter 3, about convolutional neural networks applied to nodule detection. So in order to increase your data set, you can use data augmentation, which is just maybe rotating nodules and flipping them. And so I assume you use that. But could you imagine a way where you would use a more powerful way to generate versions of nodules by maybe a generative model? It could be, again, a generative adversarial network or some other generative model that captures the variations in these nodules, and by that increasing the data set.
Sir, I think that's a possible research approach. For example, that nodule augmentation, the idea is basically to augment the data from the data that are given to us. And of course, the reason why we use the nodule augmentation is because the data set is limited. On the other hand, we have the generative adversarial network, for which the computer algorithms can generate the data by itself. So in that sense, that we can actually use the adversarial network to expand the data set that we have by making the system learn how to make, for example, difficult nodules and very rare nodules, and then that could be used to augment the data.
Do you think there's also dangers to doing that, or is it all positive?
There will be dangers. The danger will be bias, because then we introduce the data set generated by the computer, and then we classify the data using the computer algorithm as well.
Thank you.
There should be a way to basically evaluate it properly, so we have to evaluate them in a proper data set, so not augmented data set, but from clinical tests from real data.
Thank you. So another question I have is, in your Luna experimental setup, you actually provide the test data to the competitors, which creates the danger that the people who compete actually peak at the test set, and it's not under your control. So there's other ways to do that. So why did you not choose to keep the test set behind a firewall? And what do you think the impact of that was on the actual results?
Yes, I agree with that. Maybe to explain that, Luna 16 is basically not the typical challenge that we have in the Grand Challenge setup. So the idea is basically to share the data, and then the idea will be to have the data available, and many people can basically download the data and then develop the algorithm in a systematic way. And the reason why we don't keep the test data hidden is because the Luna 16 use LIDC dataset, and the LIDC dataset is actually already open. Yeah, it's already open, so even if we keep them hidden, and they can access the data.
So on page 67, I saw something that surprised me a little bit, namely that Aidens, which is a company that participated, did choose to provide any details about their method, which I think is very bad for science. So why did you not make it a requirement for anybody to compete in this competition to open their code and their method to the world? Otherwise, what can we learn from them?
Yes, I think the reason why we keep basically commercial system here without having to provide the description algorithm is basically to also understand that how they are doing. So like if there will be some people that will have the algorithms, but they will not publish anything, and then we don't know. And if we let them also participate in this and then put the performance, then we can compare with commercial CAD system as well. So, but I agree that it should be better if they disclose the result and the algorithm that they have. Actually, they are also participating in the other challenge, the Kaggle challenge, and then they open the algorithm there.
I understand. Yep. So at various places you combine different predictors by averaging their results. And I wonder, did you use confidence estimates? For instance, a neural net provides some rough estimate of the probability of belonging to a certain class, and you could imagine that if you're very certain, then you should be weighted higher than if you're not so very certain. It also begs the question how calibrated these probabilities are, and whether maybe you should use things like Bayesian methods. So can you reflect a little bit on the use of calibrated confidence estimates in this field of radiology?
Yes, I think having the confidence basically gives another idea whether actually the prediction is kind of like, whether the algorithms is confident that the prediction is actually high, that should be, but I have no expertise in this field, so.
Right. But it seems you're missing out on some information, because the prediction of an algorithm is not just, one of k classes. It actually gives you some sense of, probabilities, which are real numbers. And so you could use that information.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, point well taken. Thank you very much. And thank you for addressing the question of industry and science, which for a Siemens employee is very relevant. We now move to Eindhoven, where Professor Bluim works. Thank you very much for coming from Brabant to Gelderland, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Dear candidate, first of all, my congratulations for this beautiful achievement. I want to start with a somewhat personal question. Say I take part in a screening study, and I receive the news that something suspicious has been found and I have to come in for additional testing. When should I be more worried about my health? When the conclusion was drawn by an expert radiologist or by a CAT system?
Honored Madam, I think you should start worried if the cancer is already proven by pathologists.
That's a very good answer indeed. Your overall goal, you say in your introduction, is to improve efficiency of screening. And you want to use a CAT system as a first reader, so indicating to the radiologist what areas to look at. And often the idea is to design CAT systems such that they can eliminate a large number of cases and only a small percentage is actually seen by radiologists. But the CAT systems you describe give at least one false positive per scan, so all scans would have to go to pathologists. So when can we consider the use of a CAT system more efficient than current practice?
Yes, that's actually correct that if you want to have a system that is implemented and evaluate whether it actually improve the workflow, I think we have to do another research on that, and basically we have to, and we are also working on that actually. So we are applying the CAT systems in a certain setting, so in the radiology setting, and then we basically make a scenario, for example, a second reader, first reader, and we have to evaluate whether it actually improve the reading time for the radiologists. So the performance of the CAT system is of course important, so the better sensitivity is with a very low number of positive, then it should be better. But the exact threshold, what kind of sensitivity we actually need, and then what number of false positive we actually can afford, it's still not answered yet.
So in chapter 2, you describe a method to detect large nodules, and you use features crafted specifically for this application. Now, I happen to know that your supervisor, Professor van Ginneke, in the previous century, he used to force all his PhD students to work with general filter banks for any detection task. So did you try that first also and did it fail, or did your supervisor have a change of faith in recent years?
I never had instructed to do that.
Have you considered using more general filter banks or sift filters or
No, I think what
features?
is more important is to understand different type of feature extractions, and when it is possible, then we have to try different type of feature extraction and then evaluate the performance gain. So there are several feature extraction that are good for certain tasks, and then the other feature extraction that are good for different tasks. So I think we don't have like one feature extraction algorithm that works for everything. So in the beginning, that we have to evaluate everything and then see what happens.
Chapter 2 is specifically aimed at large nodules, because you state that most CAT systems cannot find them, and it's not a problem, you say, because they're really obvious to human readers. So that puzzles me. If they're that obvious to human readers, why cannot CAT systems find them?
Yes, the reason is because the CAT systems are typically, they are designed to detect very difficult to see nodules, so this becomes the first priority. Then there are lots of nodules that were missed, which are small nodules, and the CAT system are therefore developed to catch these very difficult to see nodules. And the reason also because that when we designed the CAT system to be able to detect those, the feature extraction algorithms that we develop are aimed specifically for that. So like the shapeness and then the roundness, we pick those that could capture small nodules perfectly. And then at certain point that the feature extraction that we pick, we have a very nice performance to detect these small nodules, but then large nodules are being missed because then you don't penalize them heavily. They are considered to be the same as small nodules. Like missing one large nodule is the same as missing one small nodules.
Mm-hmm. And do you think in theory it will never be possible to capture everything within one single system, not even with the latest techniques? Or will you have to combine a number of different CAD systems?
No, I think with the convolution networks at this moment, it should be possible. It's still, so using the ConvNet, we observed that different type of nodules are detected. Of course, some rare nodules are still not detected very well, but they are already much better than the previous system. So there are some works to do to make it very sensitive, detection accuracy high enough for all type of nodules. I think that's the next challenge.
Yes? If you have one very short question, you could put it.
Well, how would you say there's some work to do? What sort of things would you consider to improve the ConvNet?
I would probably go for, so at this moment we are developing and optimizing the networks by saying certain patch or certain location is a nodule and not nodule. The idea that comes to my mind would be to have labels that are not only nodules, but they're hierarchical level like nodules and different type of nodules like semi-solid, solid, and then non-solid, and then we could probably improve and gain something on that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Pluim. The candidate is running for a doctorate in medicine, but the degree of diplomacy is impressing. So now we move to Dr. van der Heijden. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and I also would like to congratulate you, the candidate, with his excellent work and his team and family, of course. My position as a chest physician or a pulmonologist is that once people are worried, they'll really start getting worried when they are being referred to my outpatient clinic for further evaluation. And with this in mind, I've learned a lot from your thesis, and I would like to pick your brain on a couple of matters, because, well, especially the prediction of malignancy is of the highest importance, and essentially, as you show in figure 6.2, our radiologists aren't that bad at all, so they really do a good job. The system is better. But you also use what we call the Brock algorithm to predict the risk of malignancy, and your system is still a bit better. But if I then go back to chapter 4, and on page 79 you state that the deep learning algorithms that you've developed may be influenced by the training data set that they learned on. And in the actual test that you did, you used the NLST data set, which has 5% of true positives, so actual lung cancers amongst 20,000 nodules. And you used the Danish study group, which has 34% of malignancies, lung cancers, in a much smaller group. Would everything be better if the algorithms would have been trained, well, for a national base or a regional base? Because when I look at my practice and compare my practice to, for example, a colleague who works in Indonesia, for example, or Southeast Asia, many more people present with infections, histoplasma, sarcoids, tuberculosis, childhood infections that will all give small, well, possible nodules. And the data sets that you've used, well, came from the US or from Denmark. How would you implement a even better system or improve your training sets?
Arnaud, sir. Yes, so there will be some biases when we train the data, of course, because of the regions. For example, if we train data from Dutch population compared to the American population, there could be some differences in the city. So your suggestion on training the CAT system with specialized data, like regional data, could probably work, but I think it will be more interesting to have a large database from the world populations. One of the reasons is because specialized data typically have a smaller number of samples, so it's a smaller populations. And for machine learning algorithms, it's always better to have bigger data sets. So my proposition would be to train the machine learning algorithms with the world population, so with all possible data that we have, as long as it's still relevant. And then we could fine-tune it, so we have another data sets from local or country that we can fine-tune basically the algorithms to basically more specific on those populations.
And how would you go about in building this database then? Should I imagine it like a digital biobanking or an image biobanking from all the patients that are going through a surgery and have a proven cancer, or all the others that have are not proven cancer?
Yes, I think that's an interesting point. That it's one of the difficulties basically to collect all of this data. So different countries have their own regulations on how to basically collect and share the data, and then also the hospital also even have their own regulations. So it makes it difficult to gather the data in one place so that like researchers can download those data. Your suggestion in using biobank is so basically one of the options that we could have, that we have like a world institution that can collect this data, or in such a way that we can have the data in one place. Another option would also be to have, it's probably not possible at this moment, is to have, because typically we train the data by downloading the data. So the data move from a certain location to a local location. What we could also do is to move the algorithm from our institution, and then we send the algorithm to, for example, US. And in US, they have their own database, and then they can just click train the system, and then we get the weight back. So we learn something without looking at the data. So I think one of the issues why we cannot share the data easily is because of the privacy issue from the patients. So that could also solve the problem.
Okay, thank you.
That's your last question now.
My very last one, it's very short.
Well, I hope not for the lifetime, but for now.
Well, I've learned a new term, and it's blobness. I've never heard of it. Is it a reciprocal of speculation?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Blobness
Yes.
is one of the terms that you use to characterize nodules. And, well, as a doctor, I'm more concerned when there's speculation found on a CT scan. Is it the same? Or is it an entirely different world to determine if a nodule is blobbed or spiculated?
I think it's different. So blobness basically measure the blobness, the sphericity of a certain lesion. So it typically used to differentiate between a nodule and a vessel. And because vessel is not a blob, it's like a tube. And then speculation is something else. It basically describes the boundary of the nodules. So whether it's actually spiky or not. So in that sense, we should use another features to.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think that's one of the big differences between a machine and a person, that the machine wouldn't have all this body language to explain us about the differences. Thank you very much. We're now moving to a very special person, Dr. Zinger from Eindhoven, who confessed to me that she's fluent in 5 languages. I'll be very curious to know what language you're going to use to address the candidate.
I will start just using English. Mr. Candidate, at first I congratulate you with your impressive work and the very nice book that we have here and all the accomplishments there. In the beginning, on the page number 11, when in the first chapter you introduce metrics that you will use to evaluate the quality of the systems you build, and there are several metrics you talk about. All of them you use throughout the thesis, sometimes giving more attention to some of them, pointing out that they're important. So now when you finalize the work, what is your conclusion on these metrics? Would you suggest to rather use one of them to get the cut quality, or better all of them and then see that they all exceed the state of the art? When is the system good?
Honored Madam, so the explanation in chapter 1.7 basically describes several metrics, and those metrics are built up into explaining about the ROC and FROC. And those ROC and FROC have different purposes. So ROC, you can basically measure the performance of binary classifications, and then FROC basically serve another purpose, because in FROC, then you could detect several cat marks in one scan, so the number of false positive may vary, so it doesn't work when you compare the system in ROC. Yeah, so I think ROC and FROCs are 2 basic measurement that is used to basically evaluate the performance of our system. So I think we should stick with it.
Thank you. My second question relates a little bit to the previous discussion today about the availability of medical data, and especially for your systems you need labeled data, which is always a little bit scarce. So in relation to this, what is your opinion on using so-called transfer learning? So when you know probably what it is. Could you let us know whether it would be a good idea and why?
Transfer learning, basically a method to train an algorithm using a much bigger data set. It could probably in a different type of domain, for example, and then you applied it when the data in the target domain is not big enough. So I think, based on my experience, transfer learning is very helpful in the sense that you have, for example, a very big data set from ImageNet, like they collected 1 million of images. And when we train the CovNet, basically we train the filters. And the filters in very few first layers are probably equal when we try to predict cats versus dogs and then nodule versus vessel or something like that. So I think it's very beneficial to have the transfer learning to be used. Of course, that the performance gain that you get from the transfer learning will diminish depending on the size of your target data, because you have to retune your network. And yeah, as long as you still get some performance improvement by using transfer learning, you should use that.
Okay, maybe one more question then. On the page number 25, you discuss context features, which actually in that place of your book, they mean distance from the candidate nodules to some structures in the lungs. And well, then you apply these features as context. Today in the discussion, you mentioned possibly other options, such as using a nodule type. So my question is, do you consider those selected context features the best, or they are just the beginning of exploration of more context for your work? Is there enough context?
Yeah, the context features was basically selected because there are some like faint distribution in the lung, like the locations of the nodules, yeah, related to this yeah, pleural wall or carina. The performance gain that you get actually is quite limited in my opinion, so we basically selected these features, and then yeah, it improves the performance, but a little.
Yes, are you satisfied with this last answer?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, and safe travels back to Eindhoven. Then we move to the next one, Dr. Chompi, being from the Department of Pathology. You're the one who at the end can really know benign from malignum, so we'll be curious to hear what you think about these improvements in your competitive subject, radiology. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Dear candidate, first of all, congratulations with your manuscript. Very nice, great job. And congratulations also to your supervisor. I'm actually very happy that I could work with you on the first part of your first years of PhD. But not all the chapters in this manuscript we did together. So I'm actually curious about chapter 6, which is about the system that you developed for estimating malignancy probability. And the performance that you report, you say that you obtained by combining actually networks, multiple networks that process 2D and 3D data, right? So the input of the system is a CT scan, which is 3D data. But then you show performance combining 2D and 3D data. And I can imagine that 3D data is some kind of superset of data of 2D. So all the 3D data already contains 2D data. So what is the idea of combining these two types of system, and what you can gain if you combine 2D and 3D?
Sir, yes, the performance of the COFNET algorithms that we applied in chapter 6 basically consists of multi-view 2D COFNET and also the 3D COFNETs. That is true that basically the slices that you get that you use for the 2D COFNET is actually a subset of a 3D COFNET. I think the gain here is that you have when you use the 2D COFNET, you have fewer parameters, of course, because you apply the 2D kernels instead of the 3D kernels. And then that gives some advantage in multi-view 2D COFNET, so the performance is slightly better given the data compared to the 3D COFNET. But the 3D COFNET, on the other hand, should be like supposed to be the main like algorithm that you use in the future when we have the bigger data sets. So yeah, in the end, we combine the predictions, and combining basically different architectures always help. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, right, because in the end you combine 10 networks processing 3D data and 10 networks processing 2D data.
Yes.
And have you tried to combine like 20 networks only processing 3D data in your ensemble? Or in other words, do you think that, let's say, the power of the system is in the combination of many systems, independent systems, or in the, say, the variety of data that you have, 2D and 3D?
I think it's both of them. So if we consider only one system, then the performance compared to figure 6.2 will be around 0.92. The average AUC will be 0.92. And when we combine these algorithms together, it will be 0.95. Yeah, and also the reason is because it's kind of like bagging approach where you have a different type of data. So the network actually, the architecture is different, and the network also sees different images. because of the way it's trained. Like you pick some random nodules, and then the other algorithm basically have seen different set of nodules.
Right.
So in that sense, that you have actually different systems that look at slightly different set of nodules, and then they have different score given to a certain test set. So when you combine those, then you can improve the performance, then combine, because then you see more images, basically.
Okay, thank you. Another thing that you mentioned in your thesis is that when you train this system for estimating the malignancy probability in the loss function, actually you say you penalize errors when you classify large nodules. So actually this makes sense because large nodules are more likely to be malignant. But I think, so the whole idea of screening, as you say in your thesis, is to detect malignant nodules at the very early stage. And I can imagine that some of them can be very small. So do you think that this strategy will hamper, let's say, the way your system will be able to detect malignant nodules when they are very small?
Yeah, yes, it will, I think. So basically because, yes or no? Because the idea of penalize the larger nodules is basically to make distinct differences, because if you misclassify large nodules, then you are heavily penalized because that's more likely to be malignant. And another reasons why we use this weighting is because there are fewer large nodules. So if you remove the weighting, then the network will basically learn that, okay, large nodules are very suspicious to be malignant because the majority of malignant nodules are large, but it will not learn to predict large benign nodules properly.
Okay,
but the idea of the question about hampering the performance when the nodule is still very small, yeah, we haven't actually looked at it specifically, but yeah, considering the AUC curve, I think that's minor.
Okay, thank you. I think my time is over.
Just in time.
Okay.
Absolutely
Perfect.
brilliant. The thesis has been approached by various number of different disciplines, but at the end of the day, we'll be curious to hear what a radiologist thinks about this computer-aided diagnosis tool. The floor is yours, Dr. Peters.
Thank you very much. Mr. Candidate, first of all, I would like to congratulate you and your team as well for this wonderful work. And actually, I would take some time to also compliment you on the cover of your thesis, because I think it illustrates very well the work you did for lung cancer screening. And as a radiologist, I can agree very much on the fact that having to look at all these scans is quite boring, and having to look at very many small details and pay attention all the time. So I'm quite excited about the progress that you've made about lung cancer screening. And I believe that you are quite modest about the results. I can imagine that some studies still have to be done, but I would like to be a little bit more optimistic. When will we be screening, and what do we, in terms of concrete research, need to do before we can actually go for it?
I'm not, madam. Do you actually mean the screening or the computer-aided diagnosis used in screening?
Well, I can understand that without the system, without the algorithm, the screening will not be reality yet. So in terms of if we have a good algorithm, screening can go on, and we can start screening. Why don't we yet? And
Yes.
not the regulations, the political things and the money, and because even in the United States they're already starting the screening programs.
Yes, but of course, I think the main issue is still the regulation. Yeah, I think it's very important question, and then I think the question about when we should implement the computer algorithms or not, we should probably start now. I mean, these years, in the sense that we already have some algorithms and they are not in the clinic. One of the reasons is because the performance is not perfect yet, but we cannot be perfect without having data, more data. So what we have to do is to work together, researchers and also the clinicians. We deploy the algorithms, and then these algorithms will be used in the clinic, not as a first reader in the first place, and then look at the mistakes. And if we use a standardized reading protocol, then we basically have to identify, okay, these are the location of nodules, and then the CAD system miss these locations, and the CAD system detect these nodules. And that's already give a very valuable information for the researchers to improve the performance of the system. So I think it should be now, but it should be together, not waiting for each other to just wait for a perfect CAD system or waiting for open regulations.
Because when we look at the curve and on page 105, the system already does better than the radiologist. So when will be good enough? How long do you, where does the curve have to go before we think now is good enough?
I think that's interesting question.
Because I agree that we should go hand in hand.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be research on its own and then the practice. And now we're talking about cancer screening. There's many fields in radiology where I think CAD systems and computer algorithm can and should be helping us. Perhaps not replacing us, but I think helping us, but also making our work more fun and helping us. So would one way of looking at the results perhaps also take the time factor into account? In this study, you looked at one point in time, I believe. Did you consider looking at the nodules at different points in time?
For my thesis, not, but I know that we are working on, another student is working on multi-point malignancy prediction, basically.
Because as radiologists, we don't look at the scan once, we look at it over and over again. So we have also the fact that the time can... in terms of when we, in the end, use the computer algorithm, what would you suggest the radiologist needs to know about the computer algorithm? Should he blindly believe in it and trust it, or should we have some tools knowing when to agree or disagree, or be critical about the system?
Yeah, I think in the beginning you should be critical with the systems because, of course, as also discussed, that machine learning algorithms have biases, of course, depending on the training data set that we use. So depending on where we get the data, you may have these biases, and then you have to be critical when using the algorithm that, okay, these biases is actually not good for a certain type of nodules. For example, like if we have many rare nodules, then those will not be detected properly by the CAD systems. And when those happens, when that things happens, then there should be a tool that basically says that, okay, this algorithm detect this as a nodule or malignant nodules. You should be able to say yes or no. Then, yeah, radiologists will have to look at it as well and then correct if the algorithm says whether it's good or not.
We would like to be more dichotomous as well, but in the end we are not always. And does it mean that we need to know about all these systems, all these features that are used every time a different algorithm is added to the system?
Well, that's a cliffhanger. We don't know the answer, but maybe it'll come in due time. Thank you very much, panel, for the excellent questions. I give the floor to the candidate.
Having defended my doctoral thesis to the best of my ability, I would like to thank the rector and my supervisors, as well as all those who have honored this ceremony with their presence.
The questions were excellent. We're going to discuss about your answers in the deliberation that follows. We'll be back. I assume it will not come as a great surprise, but the Council of Deans of the Radboud University Nijmegen has decided to award you the degree of doctor. And I invite Professor van Ginneken to discharge the task assigned to him.
In the name of the Lord, with the power entrusted by law to the Council of Deans, I hereby confer upon you Arnaud, Arindra, Adiyoso, Setio, born in Lyon, the title of Doctor from Radboud University, Nijmegen, to which are attached all the associated legal and customary rights and duties with respect to academia and society. As proof thereof, I present you with this doctoral diploma, signed by the rector and the doctoral thesis supervisors and co-supervisors.
Please be seated. The first congratulations will be spoken out by the supervisor.
Dear Dr. Arnaud, Arindra, Adiyoso, Setio. What perfect timing. 2 days ago, my Vici project, my 5-year grant for automating lung screening, has ended. And you were the first researcher that I hired on that grant, together with Francesco, also here present today. You both started 1st of October 2013. So your contract ended October last year. And in that month, 4 years after you started, you handed in your thesis. And this sounds like totally normal, right? But I can assure you that this is, unfortunately, quite rare in our group. But typical for you, Arnaud. Everything delivered as promised, high quality work, perfectly on time. So the title of my Vici project was Less is More. And I took that title, which I borrowed from a German skyscraper architect, because I think we can extract more information from screening CT scans for more diseases than just lung cancer, using less money by automating it with computers. But maybe the title Less is More also applies to you, Arnaud. I checked some of our emails. Your typical email to me starts with, "Thanks, Bram!" exclamation mark. Or, "Thanks, Bram and Colin!" exclamation mark. Followed by a one-sentence statement briefly describing what you had done. And you probably had seen these thousands of unread emails in my inbox, and I explained to you that I only read the first line that Gmail shows you. So you adjusted your message to that. But less is more. I had to give you actually only very few directions, and you would start off and do a lot of excellent work, often more than what I asked for. There is one scene which for me was typical for you, and I will not forget it because it showed me that I made a big mistake. I thought initially that you were a bit shy, and you should become more outspoken and approach other people more directly. And the mistake that I made is that I did not see that you were actually doing that, but in your own quiet, soft-spoken, very polite way, in your own style, not in front of everybody. I've never ever heard you raise your voice in all these years. Maybe you have been occasionally shouting and cursing and banging your head on your keyboard, as some people in our group do, but I've never seen it. And the scene I remember is one day in the office. I was sitting with you behind your computer screen. We were discussing something, and I said you should ask Francesco, because he knew the answer to what we were discussing. And I said, Francesco was sitting on the opposite desk, 3 meters away from you, and I said, come on, go ask him. And I looked at you, and you didn't do something, and I almost pointed at him. I always wanted to shout, hey, Francesco, come here. But I looked at you, and then you looked at me, and then you saw that you really had to do something. So you quietly stood up, you walked all the way across the room to the other side, and very quietly asked Francesco if he could come, and Francesco came. And that's so typical for your behavior, so opposite to maybe my blunt way of, Dutch way of shouting. So okay, yeah, this is Arnaud. And later I learned, this was a surprise, even though at work you would often be a bit in the background, you can lead actually, because in another field you excel, and that's music. You were the director of a really big Indonesian orchestra called Angklung. And I attended a performance you gave in the Frits Philips Muziekgebouw in Eindhoven. It was completely sold out. The Indonesian ambassador was there, lots of important people, and you were conducting this big orchestra. And you just had a haircut before that orchestra, and you were wearing a very fancy suit. So you looked like totally different from the Arnaud I knew. So I remember that in the first few songs I was wondering, is it really you standing there? But then you turn around to the audience and so yeah, it was you. You were confidently and energetically conducting this big orchestra. And later you told me you also had made most of the arrangements to play the modern pieces with these angklung, traditional Indonesian instruments. It was very impressive and beautiful. Okay, about 1 year in the project, you joined what we called then the deep learning team and the deep learning meetings. And this changed your PhD a lot. It was exciting, and you picked it up very quickly. So you've managed to be the first to publish a good CT nodule detection system based on convolutional networks. This paper made it into the special issue of TMI. In 2 years, it already has 166 citations. That is truly exceptional. And then you made all your data available and organized Luna 16. You wrote a highly cited challenge overview paper on that, which was a lot of work. And meanwhile, the field was moving so quickly. In fact, you've done a lot more than what is today contained in the thesis. There's a complete other chapter that we couldn't finish because things were changing so quickly. And we had all these other projects to pursue. At some point, I told people in the US that were organizing a $1 million Kaggle competition that their setup was not good at all. They should do it completely differently. And to my surprise, there was one clever guy from Kaggle who actually understood what I was saying. And he said we should do what I proposed, and now I was, of course, suddenly part of the organization. And there was a lot of work that had to be done at very short notice. So, guess who ended up doing all that work? Not me, of course, but you and Colin. So you were instrumental in the Luna Challenge and in the Kaggle Data Science Bowl. But you did a great job. We had a lot of fun in Silicon Valley. So Arnaud, we're a bit sad that you finally decided you would not stay in Nijmegen to work with one of the companies that we have started. Instead, you went to Germany, where you hope that your girlfriend, Agnes, can specialize in medicine. And I would also like to congratulate her for the beautiful cover of the thesis that you made. and of course also both families who are present here today for the ceremony. But Arnaud, you now work at an excellent place in Siemens, with people that I know quite well and who are very good. So I'm sure this is a fantastic place for you to make the next steps in your career and continue with what you do so well. You can be very proud of what you have achieved, and I'm very proud of you. Thank you.
Well, congratulations, Dr. Arnaud, if I may say so. The rest is too complicated to really utter properly. It was a pleasure meeting you. It was a pleasure discussing with you. And it was a pleasure listening to your pertinent answers to the very nice questions that were put to you. You are a multi-talent. Languages, music. And I think one of the secrets is that 3 weeks after you were born, the lights in Lyon lighted up on the 8th of December, as they do every year. And that very special day in Lyon is just about your position in the scientific field. You're kind of a bright light somewhere in dark ages coming along. But we are really confident that with people like you, we're going to a brilliant future. Sisi? No, you don't have to answer the question. I just want to congratulate you for having the courage to stand up with such a stubborn person as he sees himself. But congratulations, and I wish you the very best in Germany for your future studies. And your husband or husband-to-be has confessed that you would like to come to the Netherlands, and I hope I'll be around to welcome both of you back. Parents, selamat. Toutes mes félicitations. You have a brilliant son, and enjoy the rest of the day. We'll end with a prayer. Gratias tibi agimus, omnipotens Deus, pro omnibus beneficius tuis, qui vivis et regnas per omnia saecula saeculorum. Almighty God, who lives and reigns throughout all ages, we thank you for all your benefactions. Amen.